How many of you think one of the lost arts in today's society is actually critical thinking? We kind of just accept something and it becomes popular. Like, you know, my beliefs about finding your why. Like, if I just find my why, everything in my life will be better. And I actually don't believe that to be true. I believe I can know my purpose and still lack motivation. I think just knowing my purpose doesn't solve all of my problems. I want to teach you today how to think a little bit more critical about things. Yesterday, I made a decision that we took 8% of a company, 8% equity of a company that has all of the infrastructure, that I actually believe we could take that company and at some point in the future sell that company for $100 million, okay? And I'm making a calculated risk. I'm using my 34 years of experience and looking at hundreds and hundreds of businesses. I'm looking at how much time I got to put into that business. I'm looking at return on energy, return on investment, return on objective. I'm making a calculated risk and I'm going, this is how I think we can make this work, and I'm moving. And by the end of that meeting, it's like, this is how we're going to activate this brand. By the end of that meeting, I've already made 3 connections. I've already scheduled a meeting for today on a person that I think we really need to make it happen. So I'm not going to knock the entrepreneurial operating system today, because I actually think there's millions of people have used it and it has been good for them. But I am going to challenge you in this session this morning to think a little bit deeper about things, because one of the downsides of the model is it doesn't focus a lot on revenue. There's really no revenue drivers in the EOS, and it's like everything's operational. And I want to challenge you to think in terms of quarters, which the system is built on. Like we're gonna set a path for the quarter, okay? Now I can tell you, I had a course when I was working on my doctorate in qualitative measurement and quantitative measurement. It was a degree in leadership. It was a doctorate of management and leadership, and I was in all these leadership courses, and I had to go to these real intense residencies, and I'm sitting in this course in qualitative measurement, and I'm like, what am I doing in this course? What does qualitative and quantitative measurement have to do with building a company, okay? And here's what I quickly figured out. There's 2 types of measurements. There is qualitative measurements, which are measurements that I can feel, but I can't measure. How many of you have ever had a gut feeling like this ain't going well? like this, like when they fired Jimbo Fisher at Texas Tech, and they paid him, $86 million. They asked the athletic director, why did you fire him? And he said, man, I just didn't feel that our athletic department was headed in the right direction. Okay, now last week, one of my good friends is Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze is the head coach at Auburn. I knew Hugh Freeze because he was a high school basketball coach in Tennessee. My team used to play against his teams. He was a girls basketball coach in Memphis while also being the football coach. And they made that movie, The Blind Side, after his team in Memphis. And then he went on to coach at Ole Miss. Then he went on to coach at Auburn, and he just couldn't figure out a way to get it going. And he would get this close to winning every week and then get beat. And so right in the middle of the season, they fired him. Now they're going to pay him $15 million to be fired. How many of y'all would like to be fired for $15 million, right? But they said they just didn't feel like the momentum was headed in our direction. This past year, I stuck with something for 6 months that I knew wasn't working, both qualitatively and quantitatively. I knew it wasn't working 90 days into it. And I kept going, well, let's just give them 90 more days. Let's just give them 90 more days. But I knew from 34 years of experience right here, this is not headed in the right direction. There were both lagging indicators, there's lead indicators, which kind of lead, and then there's lagging indicators that actually show the performance of what you did. And both the leading indicators and the lagging indicators were telling me in my gut that we need to end this right now. But I let it go on for 90 more days. And man, what a mistake. What a leadership mistake that was. So there's qualitative measurements that we're gonna look at today of things that you know are not working, but for some reason you just don't want to address those things. And it could be because you have a fear of conflict. It could be because you don't like hard conversations. For some reason, you got an aversion to actually just dealing with something you don't want to deal with. And so there's qualitative measurements, and then there's quantitative measurements. And a quantitative measurement means I can measure it. I can measure revenue. I can measure profits. Everybody see where I'm going with this? Okay, so today we're going to kind of do a course called Control Chaos. And in this course today, I'm going to kind of teach you psychological flexibility. Now, when you hear me use that word, what do you think I'm really saying? Because if you're an analytical mind, and I remember asking Price Pritchett this, If you've got an analytical mind, there's a lot of positives to having an analytical mind. Like I work with a lot of engineers and they think a lot, right? And they kind of draw things up. There's positives of that, but there's negatives of that. What's the negative of that if you're trying to make a big jump in a business? You overthink it, you don't move fast enough, okay? Very rigid or fixed in your thinking. So when you hear me use the word today, psychological flexibility, what I'm really saying there is the willingness to move towards something even if you don't know how it's going to work. So over the last year, all I've studied is quantum leaps, explosive growth. Psychological flexibility says we set a big aiming point, which is a big target, and we just run like crazy toward the target. And we don't know how it's going to work. We don't always know what the mechanics of it are going to be. The truth is, the decision I made yesterday to participate in this company may be a complete disaster. It may not work. But what if it does work, right? What if it could work? What if I bring a skill set and they bring a skill set? What if they have the infrastructure and I have the know-how? What if the only thing they're missing is an integration piece or an activation piece to something? What if there's just one little piece of this equation that we could bring together? My mind goes into it like, hey, I don't know exactly how we're gonna go from A to B, but I got a pretty good idea that it's gonna start with some action. And the action is, what can I do right now? What physical action could I take right now to help this brand? I could pick up the phone and make a phone call. I could schedule a meeting. I could activate something. I can get something on the schedule. I can go from mental creation into physical action right now. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to meet for 8 hours. It's like, hey, let's go.